Yes. All right. Good morning, Jelani. You got your packet? Want to make sure you have your packet. Your packet for today. I am just setting up class over here for you. Making sure you can see the screen okay. We finished the book today. Yay! It's our last day with the book. How exciting. I'm excited. I don't know if you're excited. But I am definitely excited. We are almost done with the book. Today is the last day with the book. I have been eating breakfast this morning. My brother fixed me breakfast. So I'm just kind of tossing stuff in the kitchen. And brewing up another batch of tea. Have fun.
Look, I said, look at the amount of trash I made by myself.
Yeah, see, I didn't know if that was trash or you were just hoarding Amazon stuff.
Oh, no, it's trash.
Oh, okay, well.
It's just because those shoes fit.
Oh, good.
But I just have to come outside and say, those are my open.
You can leave the product.
Oh, you have pizza?
After this. Da, 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 da. Who else do we have here? All right. All right. Let's see. While we are waiting on your classmates, well, we got a few minutes to get started. Before we get started, who's all in class at the moment? Hey, my accountability partner. Let's see. Only 2 of my 7th graders are on thus far. Or it says that 2 of them are active. It's all good. We done already contacted parents to say we are on. Hey, you. Good morning. Class starts at 10, so we are currently just waiting. Good morning, those of you that are joining. What happened? Yeah, it's a little chilly out. So, I don't normally wear my glasses, so today it's going to be interesting. My eyes hurt, man. Yeah, but my glasses, I need to get new ones because these are clearly falling off. They're broken, they're scratched. Give my students about 5 more minutes and then we're going to actually start class for today. Mr. Graham. I didn't know that was your IG handle. Are you on the phone still?
She says, hi.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, Mom. Okay.
Good morning. Is that Caleb?
She said, okay, I'm going. I said, well, what's going on? She was like, I was calling. See if you can take me to this place. I said, Mom, I was in the shower. When you called, I'm like, if you had to be there that soon. By the time I get out of the shower and called you, you were almost there.
Yeah.
I said, I couldn't make that. So I was like, what you want? She was like, I got to move this song around.
Oh man, she got things.
Oh, I got what she said.
Make sure you got your packet.
My kidney,
So that's where you're headed?
no, she said she's fine and she's there.
So good to see you. So good to see you. Can't really see you, but you know, so glad you could join me this morning. See ya. We only have 3 more weeks and then it's summer break for you guys. 3 more weeks to get all your work done and turn it in. Are you excited? I mean, we are at the end of our book today. And then next week, we'll work on your editorials. And then the last 2 weeks, you'll write your own stories. And that'll be it. All done. We'll be all done. And then 8th grade will come. And guess who you'll have for 8th grade? Maybe me. Woohoo. I might get to follow you guys to 8th grade. So I'm excited. Need some keys. I did that earlier this morning too.
I heard. And then I was like, because I could tell Lance was fussing at you, or if he was just talking to you after a while. Because it seemed like
He was happy. He was happy I was giving him a bottle this morning.
I said, no, I felt like it was a little bit of both.
You know, my littlest one, you know, he was fussing at me yesterday because he left Elmo at daycare. So he had to sleep without Elmo last night.
His lessons be learning early.
All right, Caleb, we're going to get started in like the next 4 minutes, just so you know. Just want you to make sure you have the materials you need for class this morning. So big morning hug. Make sure you have either your packet or some blank paper. Remember that all of our notes for class are posted after class. And if you missed any sessions, you can go on the YouTube channel and watch the live recaps. And what I will do is make sure I drop it in you all's chat so you can access it easier by just clicking on the link to the YouTube channel. So, but yeah, we'll start soon. We got about 3 minutes before it hits 10 o'clock. So I want to make sure that good morning. Want to make sure that we have everyone in class before we get started. But I'll go ahead and post the warm-up, which is, what do you think the ending to the book will be? Good morning. What do you think the end of the book will be? Who is going to survive? Is someone going to die? Is someone going to survive? Will something have changed? You know. So, good morning, Torian. Make sure you have your packet and something to write on, or you have your pencil and paper. And you're just writing in the comment box, what will the ending to this book be? Who will have survived? What will have changed? Do you think both our characters are going to make it? I mean, we only have 2 characters in this book, which is really interesting that the author was able to write a whole book just using 2 characters only. Like in the beginning, we have, a total of 5 characters, because we have the mom, Brian, Derek, and the 2 other men. But as the story progresses, we actually only end up with two well-rounded and developed characters. Everybody else would just be considered flat because they're not as important. So our 2 static, dynamic, round characters would be Derek and Brian. So what do you think the ending's going to be? Go ahead and type it in the comment box. What do you think the ending is going to be? And we're going to go ahead and begin recording class. So we can go ahead and get started for today. Just want to remind you that all of our live sessions are recorded. In addition to that, they are all posted online for you in case you need them or want to refer back to them. So they're all on the YouTube channel. Today, I will make sure that I upload the additional YouTube live sessions that we've had. The additional live recaps that we've done to the YouTube channel, so you have all of them. But we are going to go ahead and get started. So in the comment box, just tell me, what do you think? Good morning, Lady E. What will be the ending? What will be the ending? Good morning, Damon. So glad you could join us. What do you think is going to be the ending? Who is going to survive? Do you think that both Brian and Derek are going to survive this story? Remember, we left off with them being separated on the raft and Derek pretty much going down the river. So is Brian going to... Awesome. Is Brian going to be able to survive and find Derek? Is he not going to be able to find Derek? What do you think the ending of our book will be? Because today we get to the ending. That's it. We're done. Finito. Gone. Done. Finished. So I'll go ahead and give you like 2 minutes on the clock to just write your comment in, and then we'll move on through the rest of our lesson so we can actually read today. Tap, tap, tap. What's going to happen at the ending? Type it in the comment box. What shall our ending be? This book would be a fun book to start off with at the beginning of the year because it has so much potential to change the ending because of what happens in the book. Good morning, Miss Williams. So glad you could join us. So I'm going to give you 1 more minute to tell me what do you predict might happen at the end of this book. Are Derek and Brian both going to survive, or are they not? You said that they're both going to both survive. The water is going to kill them. Oh, it's going to get them pretty much. And they're going to wake up on the dock? Okay. I think you might have finished the book. Way to go. I did post the reading for today's class online already. And of course, as always, I will post our notes upon completion of class today. So if you're unable to jot down notes quickly while we're going over them today, just remember you can get them after class. Help is going to come and save them. And Help is going to come save that dude. I hope so, Torian. You thinking of like an airlift? Like a helicopter might fly over and kind of see them on the river and come down? I just also want to point out before we go on, because this will be the last time I'm flashing the cover of the river. I think that it's very interesting that the book itself alludes to the idea of a waterfall. But in all reality, we know that, I like your thinking. But in all reality, we know that he does not go over a waterfall. However, this would be the author choosing a very strategic cover to make you think that, you know, it's almost like building suspense in an image. So it makes you think that they're going to go over a river's waterfall and, you know, die. But so I just want to point out how the cover of the book itself kind of highlights this idea and notion. Give me 1 second. One of your classmates is trying to figure out how to get on. All right. So coming back. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Just wanted to make sure that your other classmates were able to get on because they were having trouble. Oh, sweet. All right. So let us continue for today. So this week's schedule, it is Thursday officially. So we have managed to finish Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's work. We're on Thursday. We're going to start, we'll finish today with chapter 24. We'll do a very quick close summary. And then tomorrow, the idea is that you will be 100% completed with the book and you'll write your editorials. Just so you know, what I've done is I've mapped out our editorial. We'll start the conversation today if we have time. We will pick up with it on Tuesday of next week. So I do not expect you to write an editorial by yourself over the weekend. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to, spend your time trying to, just research what do you want to talk about in your paper. Okay. So we will spend next week writing editorials. So do not panic. Do not worry. Do not try to rush and finish it. We will work on that together. But for today, we are going to go ahead and focus on both chapters 23 and 24, which are the endings of the book. Okay. So looking at both these chapters, our objective has been the same this entire time, To analyze, meaning to break apart, to dissect, to, go in with a microscope and discuss the reading and understand how this story was shaped by the setting, being the wilderness and the river, the characters, in this case, Brian and Derek, and the plot, meaning how the story moved forward. So thinking about suspense, how that was built out, thinking about the climax itself and the tension that was created and some of the obstacles that they faced. Okay. So that is what this objective essentially has us doing. So continuing with our effective strategies while we read, activate, infer, and clarify, we're going to quickly just look at our notes from previous class before we move on, just to make sure we're clear. So our final goal is to make it down the river and save Derek's life and try to stay alive. Unfortunately, based off of our summary last class, we know that Brian and Derek continued down the river until what appeared to be a waterfall, which turned out to just be fast rapids. They got tossed into turmoil. Brian attempted to save himself and Derek. However, he was tossed in the water and Derek was lost to the river. Brian now has to figure out how to save Derek and himself while trying to figure out where Derek even went and if he's still alive. Okay. So if you weren't with us last class, this is what happened. So let us go ahead and pick up with our reading for today. So we're going to be starting on page 5, which is chapter 23. If you already read it, great, but I want to make sure that you fully understood it. So we are going to go ahead and recap this. It's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the reading itself. So we'll be able to go through and discuss it. So let us go ahead. Make sure you have your packets on page. No worries. Welcome back, Jelani. Make sure you have your packets and you're on page 5 because we're going to go ahead and pick up with this reading. I will make sure you can hear. So.
He became something other than himself that afternoon. When he began to swim, after he'd overcome the agony of starting and his muscles had loosened somewhat, he tried to think. The raft would move with the current if it did not get hung up. Brian would also move with the current, plus he had the added speed of swimming and he should gain rapidly.
So I just want to point out, if you all are wondering why certain things are highlighted and other things are not, that's because when I read, similar to how I have you all take notes, I take notes. So I read this on my phone and my Kindle. So what you're seeing in orange or yellow or pink are my notes. So I highlight as I read, and I found that to be important. Just this little part here to be important. He became something other than himself that afternoon because it talked about him pretty much transforming as a character. When he began to swim after he overcome the agony of starting and his muscles had loosened somewhat, he tried to think. I like the description that's given here, like the imagery. So if I was writing my own story, I could use this as an example of how do I build out imagery when describing how someone is feeling and how they're struggling. The raft would move with current if it did not get hung up. This lets me know that he got stuck. So this continues with that idea of a problem. Remember, no one wants to read a story that doesn't have some type of tension or a problem or some type of obstacle. And then the idea that could he move quicker than if he just swam himself and tried to survive. Okay. So just so you know, because I've never mentioned this, I want to go ahead and point that out now. That's what we've been looking at.
Brian would also move with the current, plus he had the added speed of swimming and he should gain rapidly. But when he rounded that first bend and did not see the raft, and cleared the next bend 200 yards further on and did not see the raft, worry took him. He stopped at the side and stood as much as he could in the mud. It was nearly a quarter of a mile to the next bend, and there was no raft. Every muscle in his body was on fire. He slipped back into the water and began swimming again, taking long, even strokes, kicking and pushing along the mud, pulling himself forward. Another bend, and another, always reaching, and always Brian's eyes sought the still form, the thatched top of the raft. Nothing. The river seemed to have swallowed Derek. Altogether, he rounded 6 shallow bends, and still there was no raft. The stupid raft that had hung up on every bend when he was trying to steer it, and now perversely held the center of the river somehow. There was nothing but the green wall along either side, the trees that grew higher and higher now that the rock hills were passed, until they nearly closed over the top of the river, the green wall that closed in and covered him as he slid along the water, wanting to scream, but pulling instead, always pulling, a stroke, then another stroke, until there was not a difference between him and the water, until his skin was the water and the water was him, until he was the river, and he came to the raft. He nearly swam past it. Brian moved near some willows, his face down in the water, reaching with his left arm, and when he raised his head, he was looking at the raft.
All right, so just kind of pointing out how a few seconds ago he was complaining about not being able to find the raft and how difficult it was for him to travel down the river with Derek on the raft because they kept getting hung up and everything. And in this case, when they separated, the raft seemed to just float down the river with no problems whatsoever. And so we know he's been looking and searching, and at this point, finally, he's found the raft. So we finally have found the raft. Now the question becomes, as a reader, we should question, this is where curiosity comes into place. Is Derek alive? And is he still on the raft?
It had somehow come through all the bends and curves, and here must have caught a slight cross-current. The raft had moved to the outside of a shallow curve, and it glided back beneath some overhanging willows and low trees. All that showed was the rear end of the raft and the bottom of Derek's shoes. Derek! Brian's hand had almost brushed the raft, but had he not looked up at the exact point that he had, he would have missed it. He grabbed the raft, pulled himself up alongside. Derek lay still, though his body had moved, twisted sideways on the raft. Derek, he said again, softer. Derek's head was still to the side, the eyes half open. But if he had been pushed underwater in the rapids, even for a moment, it might be too late. Derek. He looked done.
All right, so he's found Derek. Great. Before I reveal what goes on to the next page, I want you to infer, do you think Derek is alive or dead? In this description, it says that his head was still to the side, the eyes half open, but if he had been pushed underwater in the rapids, even for a moment, it might be too late. So the correct answer to my question is in that quote, which would allude to if Derek is alive or dead. And this is contrasted with the point that he looked done, gone, dead. So is Derek alive or is he dead? Type it in the comment box. Dead or alive? What do you think? One word, dead or alive. Write it in the comment box before we go on to reveal if Derek made it or didn't make it. What do you think, fellas? We're missing our girls today, too. Where are our girls? Dead or alive? Dead or alive? What do you think? Sweet. I'll give you about 30 more seconds and then I am going to reveal the correct answer. Live, okay. Any others before I reveal? Alive, okay. We have 2 votes for alive. Good morning, Timothy. Glad you could join us. We are trying to answer the question of if we think that Derek is dead or alive at this point, based off of the quote that says his head was still to the side, eyes half open. He'd been pushed underwater in the rapids. Even for a moment, it might be too late. Alive. Okay. So you all are correct. It's just interesting that the way that the author wrote it, this part here, if I told you to make an argument to support your claim that Derek is alive, you would be able to pull from here. If he had been pushed underwater in the rapids, even for a moment, it might be too late. That part right there lets you know that he survived, okay? It says if So had this had happened is what it's implying, and you would have to make an inference around that. So good job. Great job answering that. Torian, Caleb, and Jelani, you all are correct. So.
Gone. Dead. Brian tried his wrist but could feel no pulse. He watched Derek's chest, but it didn't seem to move. He leaned down, put his ear against Derek's mouth, held his breath. There. Softly on his ear, a touch of breath. Once. Then again. Small puffs of air. Derek! He was alive, still alive. It was as if everything came loose in Brian at the same time. His body, his mind, his soul were all exhausted, and he fell across Derek, asleep or unconscious, fell with his legs still in the water. Derek.
All right. So Derek has managed to survive, and Brian is clearly relieved. Now he does not have to explain to the police when he makes it to the Brannock's post that, Derek died and how that happened along the way. All right. So in our packets, the question that is presented is, how did Brian finally determine that Derek was still alive? We know that he felt Derek's breath on his ear. He checked his body for breathing, and he used his understanding of how to determine if someone is alive or dead. Okay. And this I kind of revealed to you because it's going to be discussed a little bit more in the upcoming chapter. But this is how he was able to determine that Derek was alive by, feeling around, trying to hear. And then we know he passed out on top of him unconscious. So let us continue and look at our final chapter, last chapter in the book. Woohoo! Last chapter. We managed to read a whole book during distant learning. Look at that. Y'all should be so proud of yourselves. I hope you're over there celebrating. I am for you. But she managed to read a whole book in 4 weeks, 10 minutes a day. Look at that. Imagine what you could do with 20. All right. Chapter 24, last chapters.
Suddenly he was paddling. His eyes were open and he was kneeling in back of Derek and he was leaning forward with the paddle and he did not have the slightest idea of how he'd come to be there. He had a new paddle in his hands, carved roughly from a forked branch with a piece of Derek's pant leg pulled across the fork to form the face of the paddle. Brian was moving the raft and the sun was shining down on him and it was everything completely new to him. A different world. I must have slept and moved in my sleep. The briefcase was gone, torn off in the rapids, and with it the map. Not that it mattered. The banks were just all green and the river went ahead to the next bend. The trees hung over the top and there was nothing to see but a slot of sky and the water ahead and the endless, endless green. Nothing to match with the map.
Good morning.
He could no longer think anyway. He had no idea how far they had come, how many hours or days they had been traveling, or how far it still was to the trading post. He could only pull now. Only pull with the paddle. He knew absolutely nothing except the raft and the paddle and his hands, which had gone beyond bleeding now and were sores that stuck to the shaft of the crude paddle. Knew nothing but the need, the numbing, crushing need to get Derek somewhere. Somewhere down the river. Food, hunger, home, distance, sleep, the agony of his body, none of it mattered anymore. Only the reach. The bend forward at the waist, the pull back with the arms, 2 on the left, 2 on the right. 2 left, 2 right, 2. Into that long day and that long night he moved the raft, so beyond thought now that even the hallucinations didn't come. Nothing was there but the front of the raft, Derek and the river. The river. Sometime in the morning of the next day, any day, 1,000 days or 8 days, he could not tell, somewhere in that morning the river widened and made a sweeping curve to the left, widened to half a mile or more, and he saw or thought he could see a building roof, a straight line in the trees that did not look natural.
Leah.
And then he heard it, the sound of a dog barking. Not a wolf or a coyote, but a dog. There was a small dock. People had dogs that barked, and they had docks. He kept pulling, still not able to think or do anything but stroke, pulled to the edge of the river until the raft nudged against the dock, bounced, and then the paddle dropped. He was done. Above him on the bank he saw a small brown and white dog barking at him, its tail jerking with each bark, the hair of his back raised. As Brian watched, the round face of a young boy appeared next to the dog. "Help. Help me," Brian thought he said, but heard no sound. The face of the boy disappeared, and in moments 2 more people came, a man and woman, and they ran down to the dock and looked down at Brian, and he was crying up at them, his torn hands hanging at his sides down in the water, down in the river. The river. Derek. Hands took him then. Hands pulled him onto the dock, and the man jumped in the water and untied Derek and took him as well. Hands, strong hands to help. It was over.
That's it? Can you believe it? there's a little bit more that we're going to listen to. That's pretty much the epilogue, which goes into like what happened afterwards. But at this point, you all were correct in your predictions at the beginning of class. I asked you, you know, what did you predict would be the ending? Did you believe that they both would survive, or would one of them not make it? You said that they would. Torian, you said that you believed that someone was going to help them and, you know, pretty much save them, as well as Caleb. You told me that they were going to make it to the dock safely and that someone was going to help them along the way. So congratulations. Your predictions were correct. They have both been saved at this point. However, this, just because they're saved does not mean that they are okay, right? So we know that last time Derek was saved from the wilderness, he suffered, you know, post-traumatic stress to a certain degree based off of what he had experienced. And that he overcompensated for these things by trying to overeat whenever he could so that he no longer felt hunger like he did before. At this point, we know that he is experiencing similar trauma, more than desire, that he is experiencing similar trauma like he did the first time, or that he's going to, because there's no way that you go and go through this without mentally breaking down. And due to hunger, dehydration, the effects of having to care for someone else, like, you know, he is going to suffer, you know, through these things. We're on page 6. So let us look at just the final part of what happened afterwards, because it basically wraps up how life went on after they got back. Okay. So just about just under 2 more minutes to figure out, well, how did life look afterwards, like after this?
Brian, Derek, and the raft traveled 119 miles down a river with an average current speed of 2 miles an hour in just under 63 hours. When Brian started, the raft weighed approximately 200 pounds, but soaking up water all the way, it nearly doubled its weight by the time they reached the trading post, which was actually nothing more than a small cabin on the river where trappers could bring their furs. The post was owned and manned by a husband, wife, and one small boy, but they had a good radio and could call for help. Derek's coma was low grade, and in truth, he probably would have been all right even if Brian had not made the run, although he would have suffered significantly from dehydration. He began to come out of the coma in another week and had fully recovered within 6 months. During the run,
so it turns out Derek would have survived if they had just kind of sat there. He might have, you know, gone into dehydration. However, ultimately he had a low grade coma, so he would have survived. They didn't necessarily have to leave. I'm pretty sure when Brian realized this, he was probably kicking himself, you know, because he wouldn't have had to make the journey down the river. But to a certain degree, we're glad they did, because it made for an interesting read. We kind of would have been bored with them just sitting underneath a hut, trying to survive or wait for a plane to come save them. There's only but so much the ants can do to eat you, and the skunk can
Brian lost 12 pounds, mostly in fluids, though he drank river water constantly to make up for it, and his hands became infected from bacteria in the water. He healed rapidly. His hands became amazingly tough, and strangely suffered no real long-range difficulties from the run down the river, probably because his earlier time, had taught him so well. His mother and father vowed never to let him go in the woods again, but relented after some little time when Brian pointed out that of all people who were qualified to be in the wilderness, he was certainly one of them. About 7 months after the incident, Brian was sitting alone at home, wondering what to cook for dinner, when the doorbell rang, and he opened the door to find a large truck parked in the street in front of the house. "Brian Robeson?" the driver asked. Brian nodded. "Got some freight for you." The driver went to the rear of the truck, opened it, and pulled out a 16-foot Kevlar canoe with paddles taped to the thwarts. It was a beautiful canoe, light and great.
Just so we know, Kevlar is a type of material that is very, very tough. It is typically used for like bulletproof. We're on week 7, but it's used typically for like bulletproof vests and things of that sort. It is very strong material. So to have a canoe made out of Kevlar is a very big deal. It's also pretty expensive, just so we know.
Graceful with gentle curving lines that made it look wonderfully easy to paddle. Written in gold letters on each side of the bow were the words, "The Raft." "It's from a man named Derek Holzer," the driver said, setting the canoe on the lawn. "There's a note taped inside." He climbed back in the truck and drove away, and Brian found the note. "Next time," he read aloud, "it won't be so hard to paddle. Thanks."
You thought that was food? That's why I wanted to clarify, just so you kind of knew what Kevlar was. But yeah. All right, so that is the end of our book. Woohoo! We have finished! 100%! We finished the book! People thought it wasn't possible! They thought I was crazy when I said we would read a book in 4 weeks. And we did. All right, so going back to our story map here. We know that it started with Brian Robertson and Derek Holzer in the beginning, that he originally returned to the wilderness to be studied for survival school. We called them crazy. We know that he had issues with obstacles, animals, food, and shelter once again. That they got struck by lightning and Derek ended up in a coma. The radio broke and Derek decided that, Brian decided they was going to go down the river. They only had 2 knives, no supplies. But he was able to build stuff that he knew from last time to save their lives. This time he used the wood from the beavers to help him build the raft. They traveled down the river. During this experience, they bumped in the rocks, they bumped in the logs, the rapids picked up. They thought they was going to run into a waterfall. They didn't think they was going to make it. The mosquitoes kept eating them. Derek kept getting sunburned. I mean, this is a lot. This was a lot. Derek had feelings of despair, anger, frustration, depression, conflict. This just added to the different stages of grief. And ultimately, he kept his eye on the prize, which was to make it down the river, save Derek's life, and try to stay alive himself. All of these things he did. So look at that. I mean, we have been on a roller coaster of a story this entire time. And that's why I wanted to make sure that as we read, we continue to build out this story map, because it helps us to see how he has gone on this journey and how he has developed as a character. With that, in your packet, the final page for week 7 has the resolution. So Brian had paddled for 119 miles. He did this in just under 63 hours, which is 3 days approximately, give or take, 24 hours a day. And that the residents of the post helped them on their radio by summoning the people to come get them. We know that Derek's coma was a low grade and he fully recovered in 6 months. And in gratitude, he gave Brian a canoe. What a awesome way to wrap up the book. So let's have some fun. This point, go ahead and log on to quizzes. Log on to quizzes. And I'm going to go ahead and pin it here. Join my quiz. JoinMyQuiz.com. Boop. Pin it. Join me for our game. I am going to pull up the screen so I can see. Wait a minute. We are waiting for you to join us. Waiting for you to join us. And when we're done, you're going to come back to live. Let's see what we got. Let's see what you got. Where is my iPad? iPad waiting. I have one participant. I'm waiting for the others. We're waiting for you to join us. We are starting in 2 minutes, whether you are in or not. Thank you, Caleb. I see that you're in. I was looking for my extra iPad. My son took it and put it somewhere. I have no idea where it is. All right, you got about 30 more seconds to join us. If not, you'll be watching from the sidelines. If you still want to join, the code is up here at the top. Everyone else, we're going to be looking through as a review. So, it says, what happened to the raft and Derek? We know that it did not get turned upside down. It went down the river without Brian. We're looking at what took over Brian after the second bend in the river and no sign of Derek in the raft. You know, he got worried. Brian thought that the river had pretty much drowned Derek. Brian had become one with the water itself in the raft. He almost passed the raft, not paying attention, because it had gotten caught up in a cross current. When Brian reached the raft, Derek was still alive. What was missing from the raft when Brian caught up to it? The briefcase, of course. Brian knew how they had traveled and how far they were from the trading post. That's not true. We know that's a lie. In the morning, Brian heard a dog when they woke up. Who was the dog with on the bank of the river? It was a little boy. They had traveled, we said, 119 miles on the river. What had happened to Brian's hands? They had become infected from the water in the river due to bacteria. Remember we talked about bacteria a few weeks ago when we looked at microbes? What did Brian's parents vow to do? Pretty much never let him out of their sight or go back into the woods, right? What did Derek send Brian? And we know the final answer to that, it would be a canoe. So it looks like I have a few people in. I have 3 players in. So let's see how they're doing. We got Timothy, Caleb, and Brandon. Looks like Caleb is in the lead. If any others would like to join, you may do so. Not too bad on accuracy this morning. We're at 59%. Let's see who's going to be our winner chicken dinner today. And we are going to come back to live and discuss our next steps. Uh-oh. It looks like Timothy is slowly starting to catch up with Caleb. But Brandon's accuracy rate is a little bit better. Uh-oh. 3-question streak going on. Uh-oh, look at that. Uh-oh. This is a close race here. Okay, Caleb's done. Go to return back over to live. Uh-oh, Timothy might only 4,000 away from getting Caleb. Really like 3,180 almost, but, or 280, 240. 3,240. That's only like a few more questions, actually. If Timothy gets them accurate, he might knock Caleb out of... I know, Caleb. If he gets 3 more right, he actually might get you. Uh-oh, he missed one. But he might get a redemption question that would put him in the lead. Let's see. Oh, second place goes to Timothy. Good job, guys. Good job. First place goes to Caleb. Second place goes to Timothy. Not too bad. All right. So we have a few more minutes and I just kind of want to wrap up our reading and information from today. So I'm going to go back into my current slide. All right. So just if we were to summarize our chapters 23 and 24, we know that Brian wanted to look for Derek and make sure that he was alive. But the river separated them and they had not reached the post yet. So Brian traveled down the river some more so that he could find him. In summarizing this, we could say that in the final chapters of the novel, Brian is desperate to find Derek. He navigates down the unknown river despite the rapids. Besides being exhausted and the lack of geographical knowledge, he eventually reaches Derek, who is still alive, amazingly enough. And together they reach Brandon's trading post. So at the very, very end, after 6 months of recovery, Derek buys Brian a canoe named the Raft as a thank you present. So they manage to survive and go on. All right. So just letting you know, next class. The idea is that we are going to be talking about writing an editorial. So today I'm just going to kind of share with you overall what an editorial is and some of the characteristics. But next week, we're actually going to practice putting this information together. Okay. So if you're wondering what is an editorial, it's a newspaper article written by or behalf of an editor that gives an opinion on a topical issue. So you guys are going to be writing about Derek and his experience. Brian and his experience in the woods. I don't want to go too much in detail. So what I will say is for your editorials, you will need to make sure that you look up some information on whether you believe that surviving in the wilderness is easy or difficult and that someone should be in it. So if we look through today's checklist, we read chapters 23 and 24. We answered the questions that were related to the two. Next class, we'll fill in an organizer for our editorial and begin to write it. And on tomorrow and over the weekend, you should just kind of look up information about surviving in the wilderness that could be used to make your points in your editorial. So just want to go ahead and show you. At this point, we have managed to finish all of this work. Great job, and the book. And that is pretty much all that I have for you today. However, You are always welcome to DM me if you have questions or concerns. I saw a few of you message me while we were on here, so I will make sure that I get back to you on there. If you've missed any of the readings, you can go back on IG Live and watch them. They're all less than 10 minutes each. You would just go to my page and go to the IGTV series, and the series that's called The River are all of the recordings for each of the chapters. So you can go back there. Just so you know, in the upcoming weeks, we have 3 weeks left. Next week, we're going to focus on writing an editorial, which will be how you feel about Brian going back into the wild. And if he should have gone or if he shouldn't have gone, will be pretty much your voice and opinion that you will outline in your editorial. The following week, you all are going to write your own quarantine stories. And I will make sure that I mail to you the paperwork so that you can do that as well. Or you'll be able to pick it up from the school or at Baloo if you like, if you want it before then. But yes, we are going to finish out the semester with your stories, and then we'll be done. If you have any questions or concerns as it relates to your grades, as it relates to our work, then just kind of let me know. If you've done work and you don't want to drop it off at the school, make sure you're taking pictures and sending it to your teachers so that they can give you credit for your work. With that said, that is all we have for today. Are there any questions? You may drop it in the comment box. I'll stay online for next few minutes in case you have questions so that I can answer them for you. But other than that, if you don't have any questions, enjoy the rest of your day. Make sure you make it to the social studies class. Remember, I will be uploading our live video from today onto the YouTube channel. So it will be there today, along with the others. And all notes for today's class will also be posted at the end of our session. So as soon as we log off, I will be sure to post the notes from our session today.